and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate, and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by the incredible Catherine Berardi. Now, Catherine was actually a recommendation from the lovely Desiree Barnes, and so I've been looking forward to speaking to her for quite some time. She's the founder and also the CEO of Prime Chief of Staff, a firm that specialises in placing and onboarding, developing, and really helping high-performing chief of staffs within their role within both the private and also the non-profit sectors as well. Catherine's had a whole range of experience serving as chief of staff herself to Melody Hobson at Ariel Investments, and she also does a lot of kind of mentoring work and helping to coach and mentor students as well with various different universities. Welcome to the show today, Catherine.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. Excited to speak with you.
Thanks so much for being here, Catherine, and all the way from Iowa originally, because obviously you're tuning in today from the States, which is fabulous for all of our British listeners that I know love a good American accent.
That's right. I'm glad you appreciate the American accent. I find yours much better than ours, but yes, originally from Iowa. I've been a bit all over the U.S., to be honest. I've lived in Chicago. Currently based in Denver. I've spent time in Boston and Hawaii. So it really spans the U.S. for me, but never lived internationally, unfortunately. One of the regrets I wish I would have done in college was study abroad.
Oh, bless you. If you ever want to come to the UK, come to London, come over and see us. It would be great to have you.
I've been to London and absolutely loved it. And I went on a solo vacation. So I just went by myself. And it was the best experience I had. It was the only vacation where I left feeling refreshed and energized when I got back and not like, oh gosh, I have to go back to work. So I recommend the solo vacay for anybody who's thinking about it. Do it.
Yay. Thumbs up for singular vacays and also for coming to London as well. That's great. And I totally, without digressing too much, I completely agree with you on going away by yourself. Remember the best experience I had was I went to India for a week by myself, literally jumped on a plane and came back feeling like I'd actually had a chance to reflect and spend time. It sounds strange, but actually kind of getting to know myself almost.
Right. And how you interact alone with yourself, which I think is just so interesting. I mean, every evening when I'd go to dinner, it's like, all right, it's just you. So what are you going to do? What do you feel like? You didn't have to, worry about anybody else's tastes or what they wanted to do. It was just yourself. Okay, what do I want to do in this moment? So it is very like self-reflecting to do that.
Completely, and I think it's quite taboo as well, or at least maybe not so much taboo to be going out for dinner by yourself, but I think more people should do it. You kind of get to the restaurant, you're like, oh goodness, I'm by myself, is it for two? And you're no, just me, but actually
and you see how good of company you are, for yourself. Like put the phone away and just think and enjoy, or bring a book and read. I mean, there's some options you can do, but yeah, it's fun to keep yourself company every once in a while.
Indeed. And sorry about the little digression there, but getting into you, because I'm really fascinated. Talk to me and maybe share a little with our listeners. How did you come to be where you are today? And have you always wanted to be within the people business almost?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think growing up, I never thought about being in the people business. And even when I went to college, to university, I studied saxophone performance. And I always tell people that because you can see for many people out there that it is not a linear path to getting to where you are in your career. And that was certainly the case for me. It was not linear at all. So I originally thought I was going to be a saxophonist, the next Kenny G, who's an American saxophone artist. And unfortunately, that didn't pan out for me. And I really didn't have much of a plan B when I decided not to pursue saxophone. I was in my sophomore year and I had to figure it out. And I thought maybe business would be something that I should pursue. But at the same time, we didn't have a business program where I went to school at Northwestern University. But I was starting to take psychology courses and found them fascinating. So this is where the intersection of business and people really met. I enjoyed psychology, but I thought I want to do this in more of a business setting as opposed to psychiatry, or something like that. So I decided to get a job in the real world. It was my first, real job, not on campus, not selling ice cream or something like that, but in an office setting. And I found it through a temp agency. And they said, all right, we have an opening for you. It's not a great role, but the company is really good. If you get your foot in the door here, you could really go places. And I thought, all right, just, shoot it to me straight. What's the role? It's a receptionist position with a company called Ariel Investments. And I had never heard of Ariel Investments. I wasn't even sure what an investment was, to be honest, at the time. And reception scared me too, because it's like, I don't really like answering phones, but I'm sure it's something I can learn and do just fine. So what's funny about that is Ariel is where I ended up becoming chief of staff many years later. And I started as a receptionist there. I got to know everyone. It's a wonderful position for getting to know everybody in the firm. They had to walk by me when they came in and when they left every day. So I got to know a lot of different people, and I easily became bored. I didn't want to do my homework. So I would ask people who looked particularly stressed if I could help them. And one department in particular always seemed to be there late. It was public affairs, and they just had a lot on their plate, and it was only 2 people on the team. So they would always give me work to do, and I'd always ask for more work, and they really liked that. So I sort of worked my way into an associate position through an internship that actually I could do through my college. And that's what gave me exposure to the president, Melody Hobson. So I did that for my last 2 years in college. And then when I graduated, I wanted to see what else was out there. I didn't want to stay at Ariel and not really see what else I could do, because I was still so early in my career. So I did a ton of different things trying to figure out where I fit in. And I went into human resources consulting. I did business development. I did marketing. And what I realized through all of those experiences was that I didn't fit into any box. And that was okay. And that was a come to Jesus realization for me in my 20s, in my early career, to realize that I didn't have to fit into any particular box. I didn't have to be in a specialized field in order to make an impact at an organization. And what really solidified that for me was when Melody asked me to come back as her chief of staff. And she described the role to me, and it sounded so cross-functional, so diverse in terms of the experiences that I would have and the opportunities that I would have, that I thought, this is it. I don't have to fit into any kind of box here. I can do this role, be a great generalist, and continue to grow with the organization. So that was just a really defining moment for me, realizing that I didn't need to pick something. I could be great at many things. And there was a role for that out there, which was the chief of staff role. And at the time, I'd never heard of it before. So when I was asked to be chief of staff, I think my first question was, what? What is that? I'd never heard of it. And I had to Google what a chief of staff was. And at the time, the only thing that came up were White House chiefs of staff, political chiefs of staff. And I thought, okay, I don't know if it's like this or something different, but Melody was very open to, we'll create the role together. We'll figure out how it's going to work. But she knew me, she knew my work ethic, and that's all she needed to say, I think I can form a close partnership with you in this role, and we can figure it out from there. And that's exactly what we did.
That's so insightful. And I love your openness and transparency to say, hey, do you know what? I didn't actually know what this was, yet you're there doing it. And, I've certainly felt some of the things that you mentioned there, and I'm sure a number of our listeners were, that you're kind of, as you're going throughout your career and also in life, even to take it even bigger, actually there is that constant fear of not being able to fit in. And oh my goodness, am I a jack of all trades and a master of none? And it's so inspiring to hear that you've been through that in your position, and actually you think, you know what, actually that's a benefit, because no way it is. Being a great generalist and having experience about a whole plethora of different things, actually that's like a skill set in itself. And so I've never been a fan of that expression that they have in the UK. I don't know whether you have it in the States, jack of all trades and master of none, but I think you can be a master of multiple things. And so that's really, really intriguing. And I can't believe as well that you started off as a receptionist. Not that is a bad job in any way at all, any way, shape or form. But actually that kind of that real hard work, resilience, and just saying, hey, put my hand up, can I come and help you? Because who doesn't want to have help with their work? That's great.
Yeah. And interestingly about the jack of all trades phrase, we often cut it short by saying jack of all trades, master of none. There's actually a longer version that is jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes is better than a master of one. And so it's referring to those who are generalists, and the differentiator that brings. So to your point, I think it's important to embrace the differentiators we all have. And in this case, for me, it was being good at many things as opposed to one. It's like you said, a lot of times companies need this kind of role because they have so many masters of one in their specialties, that you need somebody then who can navigate across all of those and really bring the team together. And that's really what I think the chief of staff role is all about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And of course, now you're advising chief of staffs, which is fantastic. And, I take my hats off to all the CHROs and the, VPs, chief of staffs and everything like that out there. Because in the UK, chief of staff is actually not a massively common term. I know they use it a lot over in the States, but, you're really like a wing man or a wing woman to the CEO, and actually, helping to circumnavigate, like you say, all of these obstacles. Talk to me a little bit about kind of some of the key challenges, I guess, and also, I guess, how diversity and inclusion, which obviously we're both passionate about, kind of weaves into that chief of staff narrative.
Yeah. So the role is such an interesting one. Wingman, wingwoman is a great way to describe it. Right hand, right arm, right hip. That's how Melody would describe me. So she's more than a right hand. She's like the right side of my body. And I think that goes to it speaks to the partnership that chiefs of staff have with their principals. But it certainly is a challenging role because it can be very all-encompassing of an organization. And I think most chiefs of staff would tell you that the biggest challenges in this role lie in the of staff part. We always tell chiefs, emphasize of staff, not chief, meaning you're certainly a leader in this position, but you are one of the people. You are of staff. And that of staff mindset is so important because your goal is the betterment of the organization, not just one individual, not just that principal. Even though you're tied to them, it's really about looking out for the good of all. And I think a lot of the challenges for chiefs of staff come from the people side of this role, because there's no manual on how to deal with unmotivated people. There's no, guidebook on somebody who's not pulling their weight in the organization and you've got to make tough decisions. There's no good way to just get a team, a group of people to work together all the time. And so as a chief of staff, navigating those, using your influence, and really just high emotional intelligence is a key piece of this role, but it's not easily learned. A lot of times it feels like chiefs, they either have it or they don't. And we find that those who have it tend to find themselves in these positions more than those who don't. Mm-hmm. But to the point about, diversity and inclusion, what's important for us, and I honestly don't know what my experience would be like had I not worked for a Black woman in finance as chief of staff. Had I not served for somebody like that, I don't know where I would be today, to be honest. That experience taught me so much that I did not know being from Iowa, a very majority white population. It taught me so much about race and being color brave, as Melody says, that I don't know if I would have had. And it really has helped shape the business that I have today, Prime Chief of Staff, because what I learned through that experience and working with a Black woman in finance was that we need to embrace, again, we need to embrace our differences, what makes us unique. And the great thing about Melody and working for her is that she always disarmed the topics of race, which often we tense up when we talk about race, right? We don't know how to talk about it, and so we tense up. Melody was always great about disarming it, and she would do it in very like funny ways. She'd be like, growing up, did you ever use a washcloth? And I'd be like, no, not really. I'd use like a bar of soap or a loofah. And she's like, I thought so. Black people normally use washcloths because we have dry skin that we don't want to show off our, on our black skin. So we use washcloths to make sure that we really exfoliate our skin. And I was just like, that's so interesting. I would have never known that. And so she really tried to disarm those topics with just stories about how we were culturally different, and it wasn't a big deal. And so I think that really helped shape the way I think about Prime and what we're trying to do at Prime, which is I believe that the chief of staff role and the purview that you have in this position is so unique. It can be a one of a kind, once in a lifetime opportunity. I felt that way with my experience with Melody. I want the people who get that opportunity to be as diverse as possible, because unfortunately, a lot of our leaders today are men, and they're white men. And I think you can still learn an incredible amount from those leaders, but how interesting would it be if we could bring more diversity to the leadership pipeline? And I think we have an opportunity, and honestly, a duty. I feel a duty to do that through this role, because it's not entry level. It's one that works very closely with leaders. And it's an opportunity for those chiefs of staff to learn and figure out how they would do it differently when they reach their own leadership position. So that's really how we think about diversity and inclusion in this role. And then on a more micro level, the chief of staff, him or herself, really needs to be looking at these issues in their own workplaces. Are your teams diverse? And I mean diverse in every sense. Is everybody in the room, as Melody would always ask? If you go to a room, you're in a meeting, and it all looks the same, you have to ask yourself, why is this way? And everybody cannot be in the room if it looks the same. So I think that's a huge opportunity chiefs of staff have from their very comprehensive purview at the top of the organization to really ask themselves, is everybody in the room within my organization?
That's so well articulated and also illustrated again, as you said really well through the storytelling pieces, because ultimately, it is that embracing of diversity and everyone's, little idiosyncratic detail differences that actually bring that innovation to the table. And, of course, a lot of people are talking about diversity and inclusion now, which is great. But of course, it's not just a nice to have. It is, I love how you so passionately said it is a duty, because it is a duty. We all know by now, or if we don't, we definitely should do, that diversity of all of the different streams of D&I, whether it be race, gender, etc., is actually, it equals better business. It is not just a nice to have, and so we are duty bound as leaders in those positions of power to really try and actually make a difference.
That's right. And I think we all have a duty to hold ourselves accountable to making diversity and inclusion a cornerstone of how we operate. And I think in a chief of staff role, chiefs have a duty to hold their leaders accountable to that. One of the things we used to always do was research, leadership teams on websites. And it's unfortunate to me, but many times even today, when we're doing that same research of leadership teams, we see a lot of the same. So you have to understand that you can't be blind to it. You have to understand that, gosh, there isn't a lot of diversity here. How can we make this more diverse? We're doing an event at the end of this year. How do we ensure we have a diverse lineup of speakers in every sense? People with different backgrounds and different stories to share, because everybody's going to relate to different things. And
Exactly.
Our audience of chiefs of staff are certainly diverse, and they want to feel like there's somebody who looks like them that they can one day be. We all want to see that. So, yeah.
We absolutely do, because it's more motivational, right? I'm not saying that we're not motivated by different people who look or sound completely different to us, but it's hard to almost picture yourself in a position of power unless you see a person who looks a bit or sounds like you, or that you can in some way, shape or form relate to. And that is very visual, as you say. And we ourselves have also done a fair bit of research on looking at kind of various leadership teams, and when they do all look the same, it's, business has got to think about that message that they're sending out to the wider ether, to potential talent, which is one of the, one of your key roles, and one of the key roles of chief of staff is, how do we then procure the talent into the organization when we clearly are not representative and seen to be representative in our PR, our comms, our media, etc.
Right. And there's obviously delicate ways to have those conversations with your leadership team. It's something that we talk to chiefs of staff about, because of the role you're in. You're within earshot of the most powerful people in the organization. And making them aware of something like a lack of diversity is never an easy conversation to have. But you definitely show your bravery in bringing it up, and in an appropriate manner, but bringing it up because it's important to you, and it's important to many of the staff that you represent in your role. But it's interesting to have those conversations with chiefs. And I think more and more today, we have candidates in searches who say, look, this team just isn't diverse. It's not really representative of me. And I think I want to find an organization who better represents me. So knowing that this truly is so important and better for business for us to have diverse teams, it's just incredibly important, and we need to all be looking out for it.
And are there any kind of pearls of wisdom or kind of advice or guidance that you might be able to give chief of staffs or those in HR, or in fact in any discipline of the business world, that might be listening in today, that are having issues or want to bring it up but not quite brave enough maybe to kind of say, hey, do you know what, we need to do something else? Are there any kind of pieces of pearls of wisdom that you might be able to share that those listening in can maybe take back to their organizations to try and embed, or even put their hand up to talk about?
Yeah, I'm trying to reflect on some of what I learned from Melody, where when the two of us would enter most meetings, we were the only two women in the meeting, which was an interesting experience. And she was often the only person of color in the meeting as well. And I think there's certainly obvious, right, differences that you can see in meetings. And I think that's where, if you take a step back and ask, are the right people in the room? There's ways at which you can ensure there's a diverse group of people getting together to discuss the strategy of the business, by really just asking that of the team and making people aware of it. And I think that's a very important first step, is making people aware of it. It doesn't work to say, we are blind to this, we had no idea anymore. We all must have an idea. We all must see that everyone looks the same. So I think that awareness and trying to create that awareness in other people is a great way to start the conversation without an accusatory tone, right? Of why don't we have this? But just asking the question, are the right people in the room, or is everyone in the room? So that's why we liked that sort of, phrase that we would use, because it doesn't highlight any specific thing you need, other than to say, let's just take a moment to be aware of who's in this conversation, and are the right people here? Do we have different perspectives at the table? So I think that's really important. And, I think too, these conversations happen over time. It's not like one and done, for a chief of staff or anybody else trying to bring up topics like this with their leadership. I think if you approach it more from trying to be a resource, as opposed to, again, that accusatory or blaming manner, it works much better. I mean, let's face it, a lot of executives have egos, and they're not necessarily looking for people to say what they're doing wrong. And so you really have to make sure that you address things like this in a way that says, look, I'd love to see more representation of women or people of color on our leadership team. As a woman myself, I just think that would be so great for my growth and development to learn from another female. If there's anything I can do to be helpful in thinking about how we can make our teams more diverse, I'd love to do that. And that's a way you can put yourself out there, and again, and not be accusatory in any way, but help people understand that it's important to you. It's likely important to others, and to make it important for the organization.
So really driving home on the why. It's a really great tip, and it's putting a positive spin on it as well. It's that's enthusiasm that you kind of are conveying there, and I'm sure many of us have experienced it before. I definitely have. It's like, oh God, how do I say this without sounding like I am being accusatory, because it can switch people off very, very quickly, and that's obviously not going to help make a meaningful difference. So really great advice there. I know that you've obviously listened to the show before, and I can't believe we've been talking already for half an hour. It's just the time has gone so quickly. I'd love just to go into a quick kind of lightning round of questions, and I'll give you 30 seconds to answer each one. And you've covered a fair few that I was going to ask about D&I actually, so we've covered a whole load of that already. But I'll start off with this one, which I guess is probably the biggest, is what's your secret to success, and do you think there is one?
Oh, great question. The secret to success, I think, is hard work. I think you have to work really, really hard. And I think too, you have to define success for yourself. Don't define success in other people's terms, but define it for yourself. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be a particular title. It's whatever you want to achieve and how you want to define it. And then work really hard to get what you want.
Great answer. And what about authentic leadership? I know authenticity is a term that has been bandied around a huge amount recently, but real true authenticity, I think, still is very, very important. What's authentic leadership to you?
I love these questions. So this is an interesting one, I will say, because I think people struggle with this, especially in the chief of staff role, where you're almost emulating somebody else. You still have to be authentic to who you are. And you aren't just a copy of someone else. You have to be the version of yourself that you want to be through this lens of someone else. So it's not always easy in this role, but we talk about authentic leadership a lot. To me, authentic leadership is understanding that you are human and you will make mistakes, but that if you truly act in the way that you feel is best for yourself, those mistakes, that vulnerability will be shared. And that's what's relatable to people. And I think leaders of today and certainly of tomorrow need to show that kind of relatability. I think there's too much detachment right now from leaders and their followers, and feeling like, gosh, how can I achieve that? I've got to get up at 5 a.m. every day and do all of these things in order to be a great leader. You really don't. You need to to be firmly planted in who you are and know that in doing that, you will make mistakes and that's okay. So that's what I think of when I think of authentic leadership.
That's a brilliant answer again. And I know I'm only saying 30 seconds, and so I'm chipping here again and interrupting, but that I so agree with you on the fact that there is a massive detachment between leaders and their followers. It's not with all human beings. There's not this disparity. I'm sure, in the world of kind of social media as well, it makes things worse, for our future generations. And so really trying to bridge that gap, so critically important.
Yeah.
And I also wondered as well, although I probably know the answer to one of these, is have you got any particular sheroes or heroes that you've had within your life that you've really looked up to, that have really inspired you and helped shape who and where you are?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Melody, right? My former boss. I still call her my boss. I think that's just sort of the way it works. I think in some ways she'll be my forever boss. I certainly look up to her in so many ways for the person that she is. She taught me a lot of what I know and who I am today. And I think also there's members of my family who started that long ago. Both of my parents were great role models for me. I have an uncle who started a business from scratch and grew it over 30 years to be quite successful. So I feel lucky and fortunate to be surrounded by some really wonderful people who happen to be great leaders.
Wonderful. And finally, is there any advice that you might have given to your younger self, to the young Catherine, or even advice that you might want to share with any of our listeners?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would have given myself was you don't have to fit into a box. Embrace the differences that you bring to your job, to a team, to a hobby. Embrace those differences because they are your strongest differentiators. They're what help people understand who you are. And that gives something for people to latch onto about yourself. So don't try to fit in. If you feel like you are, someone who's better across boxes rather than being in one, embrace that. And it's okay to be different. That's probably the biggest thing I wish I would have just accepted in my earlier career and with my younger self, that I didn't. I struggled with for a while.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's been truly wonderful. You've given some incredible answers. You've been a great sport, actually, real great sport. And I've learned an awful lot from today's podcast session, and I'm sure that all of our listeners have. One of the key pieces, I normally do a little summary at the end of the show, and I've kind of scrolled away notes here across 6 different pages, and now can't even read my own notes. But one of those pieces that you said there, especially about being different and that it's okay to actually not fit into this box. I think society, and certainly, society over many years has made us feel like we need to be a certain thing, or we need to achieve a lot of money, or we have to be, I don't know, have loads of followers on social media, whatever it might be, however old you are, at whatever stage of your career. And actually, the second, as you've said, you start to realize that it's okay to maybe be, a generalist, that is totally fine, because we don't have to have, this certain, we don't need to be, trying to be a square peg fitting into a round hole all the time. It's okay to be a different cookie cutter.
That's right.
I love that piece. I mean, I love it so much, actually, that I might put it in my book, if that's okay with you. Talking about the piece of being a jack of all trades, master of none, and actually sometimes being master of many, as opposed to one, is actually is actually better. It's a
Yeah.
thing that I've always felt, as long as my career has existed. And so, that really resonated with me such a lot. And, again, the answers that you gave as well to the pieces about success, and, it said so much that it's got to be true, is really knuckling down and working hard. No one ever got anywhere without actually getting the nose to the grindstone and really working their socks off.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much, Catherine. It's been wonderful.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, no, and a pleasure to speak with you. Very much enjoyed the questions and the conversation.
I know. I want to come to the States now and come to Iowa. I'm like,
yes, yeah.
Well, I can't wait to stay in touch with you. I will be in touch online. And obviously, before I railroad the show too much and go into too much time, I will summarize for everyone. My name is Leila Mackenzie. You've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show with you every week. You've been listening to the very inspirational Catherine Berardi. You can get in touch with her on LinkedIn. Can find her profile there. Or if you have any questions about anything that's been discussed, please do get in touch, but I'll put it into the show notes at the end of today's session as well. Please do visit www.dialglobal.org/podcast, or you can visit www.leilamackenzie.com/podcast, and all of the information will be there. Just make sure you hit subscribe on Apple or your favorite podcast provider. Thanks a million. See you next week.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.